Welcome to the Essential Craftsman Podcast. I'm Nate, and we've got Matt Reisinger with us today, and my dad, the Essential Craftsman. And I'm telling you, this is classic and vintage quality conversation with these two. It's amazing how much overlap these guys have in their lives. They're at different points in their lives, but these guys are two peas in a pod, and we're talking about YouTube, social media. Of course, we talk about house construction and building science, and at the end of the conversation, it gets to a little more meaningful topics that I won't spoil, but I really hope you stick around to that part of it as well. I could not be more pleased to bring you this episode. In case you don't know, Matt is a YouTuber. He's a custom home builder in Austin, Texas. He runs the Build Channel and Build Show Network, and he is just an absolute beast in terms of building science and truly understanding what it takes to build quality structures. And he is giving all of that information away weekly for free on YouTube. It's just priceless, and I'm certainly a fan, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Without any further ado, Matt Reisinger and Scott Wadsworth on the Essential Craftsman Podcast. First and foremost, it's really nice to meet you and kind of have an introduction, because we've certainly kept an eye on you for a long time. You are one of the OG YouTube build guys, maybe the original as far as I know.
I don't know about that. I mean, you guys have been on for quite a few years now as well. I've seen your videos, Scott, for at least I remember buying a T-shirt from your merch store not too long after it opened, at least 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, yeah. So Nate provided the impetus for this. First video went up January 2016, right, Nate?
Okay.
And
yeah, well, the funny thing, we did put one up in 2008.
That's
but
right.
Things didn't work out to keep after it. I was in school, and it takes a lot of effort that we weren't ready for, and we weren't thinking of it that way at the time, anyways. But Unfortunately, we waited until 2017 or so to get more serious about it.
But you didn't wait, Matt. You jumped in right at the crest of the wave, right? 2007 or something.
No, I started 2008 as well.
Okay.
But I put up at least 1 to 2 videos a month from 2008 until today, and it was around probably around the same time you guys got serious, 2015, that I started publishing once a week, and then maybe a year or so later, twice a week, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So every Tuesday and every Friday, even if it's not great, I publish it.
Wow. So that's a ton of work, and Nate handles that for us, and I'm just kind of standing on the sidelines cheering him on. That's a ton of effort.
I mean, it's a team, as you know, Scott. It's a team effort, whether you're in front of the camera, behind the camera, editing, figuring out what to do, figuring out some sponsors. And I've got a sizable team now. I actually have 9 people that help me. And wow. we started a website, and I've got 4 other builders that shoot videos for me now as well. On my website, so we're having a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it as just a nerdy builder that likes to talk about dorky details. It's crazy that we've both grown such a fun business, and we get to teach people. So I've got kind of I always feel like I've got a triple bottom line, which is really fun for me.
Well, that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, and we'll get to the specifics of building eventually, but whether it's building or YouTube, I don't think people might realize how good you are at building teams, because it takes a lot of people to do all of these things. So can you talk about that a little bit? That's something that I've never been good at, honestly. It's maybe like something that's held me back slightly, but how do you go about building these teams?
I wish that there was some secret formula that I've learned over the years, but I think I got my start in construction 25 years ago working for a national production builder. And I had worked basically through my church, starting in junior high and through high school in construction. My dad was in the steel business, so I grew up in Pittsburgh, PA. So I didn't grow up in the business, but I watched This Old House junior high and high school, and I worked on houses in the summers through a church organization. But I didn't know that there was a career as a builder. I didn't know any builders except for Tom Silva on PBS on Saturday mornings that I was
Hmm.
taping on the VCR. So when I started at this builder right after college, they recruited me out of college, and they liked that I didn't have a lot of building experience, but that I was excited about it. And they hired me because they saw that I was good with people, that I was a good encourager. They overlooked my not so great organization skills, which still is not my strong suit. That's why I have other people doing those things. I'm not
Smart.
I'm not a accountant for a living for a reason. But I think that early experience with that builder, um, where they really hired for two things. They wanted people that were good, critical, and logical thinkers, and they wanted people that could learn the business and had good people skills. And so, for me as a 22-year-old who didn't have any, real construction building business experience, I certainly wasn't a framer for years before I became a builder. I was just a dorky, basically business major. I have an industrial management degree, and so I've always carried that with me and said, okay, who are people that I could hire that are good problem solvers? Because you guys know, like I do, that no house is the same as the last one. Every house is a prototype,
Hmm.
and the houses I tend to work on here in Austin have a lot of funky details that I've never done before. Like, how do we do this recessed base with a reglet? How do we do this hidden door? How do we do this detail with no overhangs on the front of this house that has whatever?
Hmm.
And so we're always problem solving. So one of the things that I've done over the years is anytime someone has come to me saying they're looking for work that I thought kind of met that criteria, regardless of what their resume said, I always looked for a position for them. And, of course, a lot of prayer later
Hmm.
has meant that I've ended up hiring a really good team. And I've got, we have 26, 27 people, something like that,
That's
between my two
awesome.
companies. And it's all, as you said earlier, Nate, it's all about good people because, I can't build every house. And then that also for me translates, I know this isn't really your question, but this also translates to my subcontractor base. We keep the same subs job after job. We treat them like partners in the business. We don't bid them against other people for the most part. And I have an annual negotiation with them about increases in pricing. And then I use the same trades. I have the same HVAC guy I've used in every house I've ever built in the last 15 years, 16
Huh.
years here in Austin.
Huh.
I've unfortunately had to switch electricians and plumbers last year. But prior to that, I had those other guys for 10 years, and some things changed with them. But I've got the same frame carpenter who also does what we call cornice or exterior trim and siding. He's worked with me for a dozen years. I've got pretty much the same concrete. I actually have two different concrete guys. They've done all my work for the last dozen years. So by having that continuity of really good tradesmen, it also means that I don't need a builder, a superintendent, whatever you want to call the person at the job every single day. They don't necessarily need to have 30 years of construction background. If I've got the same trades that have always worked with me, know what I expect, and my VP of construction, who they report to, has been a friend of mine for almost 20 years, and he's 20 years older than I am, and has been in the business his whole life. So, I've got this really great team of some super experienced people, some trades that have been in business for a long, long time and have always worked with me in my houses. So now I'm at this point that I'm really having fun. I don't have to be at every job every day.
Hmm.
I've got really good people that are good problem solvers and really good trades. So I feel incredibly blessed to be in the position I'm in right now, Nate.
That's amazing. Were there specific things that you had to let go of control of that was, delegating, and was that ever difficult for you? Because I know for a lot of people that letting go of the control is easier said than done.
Yeah, that one's honestly been a little bit easier for me because I'm more interested in control of the final product and some of the means and methods
Mm.
than I am in the process of control, if you know what I mean. So, for instance, I hired a COO about 5 years ago now who hadn't been in the building industry before, but was really excellent at processes and actually retired out of the tech industry. And he's come in and totally changed a lot of what we do in the back office and has made us a much, much stronger organization than I was 5 years ago. But I've kind of said, look, Steve, do what you need to do. I'm behind you. And it meant that we changed out our controller. It meant that we moved a few people. A few people didn't like him and they left. And that was good. And it was hard at times. But in the end, we're a much, much better organization. And because I've been able to kind of let go of those reins, I didn't feel like I had to be the CEO or the head decision maker. And as a result, I've got a much, much stronger team now than had it been me, because all those people are strong where I'm weak.
And your personal freedom increased. And it's a linear relationship between how much control you can relinquish to people that you trust and how much freedom and satisfaction you have in your own day-to-day, right?
100%, Scott. And there's also, it's kind of on that same point, there's also a book that I read years ago called The E-Myth by, what's that famous author? Michael Gerber. And he basically talked about how you need to set up your business so that you're not just an employee. You don't just own your own job, but you own your own business. And I wouldn't say I'm 100% there. I still am fairly active in both of my businesses. But that's the goal, right? Is that we would actually own the business and not just own our jobs. And that's maybe a little harder on the content creation front, as you guys both know. Scott, you're the face of the channel, and Nate, you're probably
the brains.
The brains of the organization. So you still own that job. But, I'm sure you're thinking about this, Scott. I know I am. What if I get hit by a bus? What if I have a health issue? What if I have a heart attack?
Oh, man.
I need to make sure that I've got people in place, both on my home building company and on my build show, as I call it, which is my YouTube channel, so that if I went away someday, I'd be okay. Do you guys know who the King of Random is? Have you ever seen that channel?
As a matter of fact, yeah. And maybe this is where you're going with it, but didn't he step back and that maybe tell that story? Because I'm not even fully up to speed, but what if that's where you're going with it?
I may not be able to tell the story perfectly, but he has probably 10, 15 million subscribers on YouTube, which means he's making giant ad revenue. Young guy with a young family, as far as I could tell. He seemed like he was a really cool dad. I mean, I don't know any more than just YouTube, just like I know you from YouTube, Scott.
Sure.
But, he seemed like a terrific guy, making great, super fun science-based videos. I think he had a hang gliding accident and died maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago.
Whoa.
Wow.
And at the time, he had a younger guy who was on the channel who basically took over the channel and then brought another woman in. I don't know if it's his wife or what the relationship is, but now there's two other people that are the face of the channel. It's still the King of Random, but the founder of the channel, the guy who was the face of the organization, died in an accident, and they kept on.
Wow.
I did not. I knew that. I think the last time I saw it, he was handing it over to somebody, and I remember thinking, wow. And I remember him saying something like, I'm going to spend more time with my family, but I did not know that he passed away. That's unbelievable. And
I have to think he's maybe at least 5 or 10 years younger. I'm almost 50. I suspect he was maybe in his low 40s when he died. So I mean, that's the kind of stuff I think about is how can I make sure that I have an organization that would survive, me being gone, including my YouTube.
Gliding, first of all.
Yeah, stay away from the hang glider. No scuba diving.
I don't like either one of those, to be honest.
That's amazing.
So this has been one of my Achilles heels all my life, is that I liked the work much better than I liked the business. And so as a consequence, I got fairly adept at the work and just muddled along at the business. And Nate has brought a clearer, fresher view to some of that because, he's not as... he did not become a carpenter growing up in my house. He became a businessman sailing under his own flag. And so that's been a help for us. But we have to figure out how to delegate and increase the size of the team.
Well, you're in the same position I am, Scott. You have a unique position where you have a building company and you have Essential Craftsman podcast and YouTube. So now you've got these two business. I don't know if they're separately incorporated. Mine are, But what a cool thing to have both and not to rely on just home building profits. But you can also have some income through the podcast and through YouTube. I mean, what a blessing that is as a builder.
It is
Because I'm
that.
the same way. I've had plenty of years where I lost more money than I made. And in fact, I just was reminiscing with my wife. We just sold our house recently because I'm building my current house. And it was only 2015 that I paid off a giant debt because I made a huge business error right before the recession by starting a speculative build that I promptly lost $250,000 on. And during the time, I kept running my credit cards up to keep myself afloat. So I had, coming out of the recession, I had $300,000 in debt that took me till 2015 to pay off.
Those are terrible nights. Those are terrible, terrible nights living through those things.
Yeah.
Wow.
For sure. But
good job paying that back. There's a lot of people who did not pay off their debts from that housing bust. So
every penny.
Salute to you.
Thank you.
That's really something.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're
and to your wife.
Investor. Yeah, and your wife. I'm sure your investor's your number one fan in the universe right now.
Well, he didn't make the interest that he expected, but he got every penny back.
Yeah.
So I felt good about that, and every sub got paid on that job. And then
that's too cool.
And then in 2015, I called it my employee I couldn't fire was that debt payment.
Yeah, I kept eating, man.
So I finally fired Chuck, my worthless employee in 2015.
The laziest employee ever.
Lazy. And I haven't had any debt since, which has been awesome. I just had a little mortgage payment that I just paid off when I sold this house.
So we have this podcast and lots of our things because you don't know what's coming next, and we're trying to always be a little bit forward thinking. I feel like you, even from what I know about your YouTube channel, but even just your mindset on building science seems quite forward thinking, and certainly lots of builders are playing catch up to you and learning about these techniques from you. So you're certainly in that role. Anyways, where are you at? What are you forward looking towards now as someone who's oriented in that way? Is the building science changing so quickly that you're kind of keeping up with it that way, or maybe tell us where you're looking?
Yeah, the cool thing about building science is physics doesn't change, just our understanding of how our houses are going to relate to the environment and the physical world around them changes. And one thing that does change, though, is our architectural styles. So I live in Austin, Texas, which is an incredibly modern-oriented town. A lot of no overhang buildings, which are incredibly vulnerable to the slightest error, as you know. Whereas older houses or houses that have overhangs, I liken to the golf umbrella. If you're out in your trench coat with a golf umbrella, no big deal. Maybe your shoes get wet, but that's it. But you take that golf umbrella away, and all of a sudden you're relying on just your hat and your Patagonia jacket. Well, it better be the most expensive jacket you can find that's perfectly buttoned up, and you better not have any rips or tears or nail holes in that jacket because you're getting wet.
Yep.
And so, for me, it always comes back to the basic. Water is the number one enemy. Water is the reason why we have lawsuits in our building industry. Water is the reason why we have typically indoor air quality issues. Mold is usually the direct result of water. Everything else in our house is paper-based and has the same temperature that mold likes. So if we get water issues, whether it's condensation or bulk water, that's where the problems come in. And you guys being in Oregon, you're pretty used to that rainy climate.
We are.
I cut my chops in Oregon too.
We don't have a lot of zero overhang houses up here. There are a few. There are a few. The contemporary movement and the minimalist sort of aesthetic cuts off those eaves. But the house that we've been laboring on now for a long time has got a big umbrella, and that gives me some comfort, right?
Yep, I love it, Scott. So smart. So smart.
What was that like going to Texas? Because I'm sure yes, it's rainier here, but there's probably things in Texas that you did in Portland. I'm sorry, there's probably things you did in Portland that you couldn't get away with in Texas. So what's that like, kind of being pretty fluent in different parts of the country? How different is it, building in the different corners of this country?
It's pretty different, Nate. So I started my career East Coast. I built many years in Washington, 7 years in Washington D.C. Then I moved to Portland, Oregon for 3 years. And while I was in Oregon, the national mold crisis, the EFIS crisis, kind of hit. And I was working for a builder in Portland that had built lots of EFIS houses where they didn't pay attention to water management. They just built a house with OSB sheathing and then just stuck this insulation on and put a latex-based stucco on and called it good. It just caulked around all the windows, and those houses had massive problems. And so kind of cutting my teeth on building science was simply just trying to learn to survive as a builder. 2001, when I started with that builder, within a couple weeks, we were in a dozen lawsuits, either for EFIS houses or for mold issues. And I was the guy who was doing customer service and figuring out what we did wrong and how do we fix it and how do we get all these lawyers to go away and survive. And we were the first builder to really pick up rain screens in Portland before they were code. And boy, did I learn a ton during that time. And I'm so thankful it was on someone else's dime. But when I moved to Texas, Texas is not too different in terms of the annual rainfall. We get about 30 to 40 inches a year, depending on the year, 35 inches a year, annual rainfall. But we get it in 3 or 4 inch increments often.
And with
which
wind.
is very different.
And with wind.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the other thing we get here is it's hot 10 months of the year. It was 72 and sunny today, even though it was 5 degrees 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So, 99% of the time we're cooling. So we have to be really, really cautious about vapor barriers in this climate because we're almost always drying to the inside. If I have anything on the outside of my wall that's going to stop that vapor from drying to the inside, that's going to be a condensation spot. And I'm going to end up with mold in my walls and potentially even some true rot. So if we're going to use a vapor retarder or a vapor barrier, it has to be on the outside of our buildings. And here in Texas, we can actually get away with a zero perm vapor barrier. And often I use peel and stick underlayments for house wraps. Like you guys think of ice and water shield, like a asphaltic based whip. I use a lot of those types of products on the outside of my house because they're great at bulk water. And I don't care about drying to the outside because it's never cold enough outside for me to dry to the outside. I'm running the air conditioner 10 months of the year, and an air conditioner is basically a dehumidifier. And oh, by the way, I also put dehumidifiers in my houses. So I always want to dry through the walls to the inside of the house. And those kinds of things that I didn't know when I first moved here in 2005, I was reading Fine Home Building. I was reading Journal Light Construction. They were all Northeast. If you're building a house in Vermont, in Maine, in New Hampshire, that's totally, at the time, now they've changed quite a bit. But at the time I was like, well, what about Texas? I don't know what to do in Texas. Like now I know East Coast and I was learning Pacific Northwest, but what's different about down here? And so I dug in and read everything I could from anybody that had anything to say about this hot, humid climate. You guys know who Joe Stiebrick is from Building Science Corporation?
I do not.
No.
Man, he's probably the preeminent building scientist in America. Buildingscience.com is his website. And if you ever have any specific questions about your climate zone, what you should or shouldn't do, go to buildingscience.com. He probably has a free white paper on that. So I started reading and talking to Joe and going to his seminars and learning everything I could about how's it different down here. And that prompted me to start kind of what you guys are doing, which at the time was blogging. And I did a written blog. And then about a year later, as I started doing this blog and realizing, people are actually reading this. My prospects that are meeting me found me on Google and are like, I read that article, Matt, that you wrote about, X, Y, and Z. So then my buddy said, hey, check out this flip video camera. There's this new thing called YouTube. And you can take a video on here, even though, we didn't have cell phones back then that took videos. So I used this flip video camera and I handed it to my plumber on the job and said, hey, will you take a video of me? He was like, what do you, okay, whatever. So that's what I did. Once or twice a month, I would just, whoever was on the job, I'd be like, hey, will you hold this? I'm just going to talk for a few minutes. and I'd upload it to YouTube, and then I'd put it on my blog. And that's the genesis of the Build Show. But anytime I talk to a builder crowd, and if you've got podcast listeners that are builders, I would say the best thing about putting yourself out there in social media, whether it's blogging, podcasting, Instagram, any of these methods, is that people that are interested in you and your company are going to find that media, no matter what it is, whether it's pictures you're putting up or whatever. And once they find you, they're going to check you out as part of their vetting process. And that's exactly what happened to me in 07, 08, 09. I'd put up a video that would have 52 views, which today we would think, oh, that's a failure. I only got 50 views. But back then I was like, oh my gosh, it's almost 75 views. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
And I would go into a meeting with a prospect, and I'm sure you've had this, Scott. They act like you're their long lost brother. Like, oh my gosh, Matt, it's so great to meet you. I'd be like, well, how do you know? Like, what do you mean? Like, have I met you before? Like, I don't think I recognize you. I watched all 10 of your videos on YouTube, and I loved how do you explain the difference between that type of insulation and these windows and what solar heat gain coefficient means. So I had maybe 10 videos on YouTube, and I realized, oh, this is good. Like, video is very connecting. People think they know you. People decide already if they like you or not. And if I go into a prospect meeting and they watch 10 of my videos, I got a chance. Either they're going to not hire me right off because they didn't like me or they thought I was an idiot, or they're going to really like me and I'm going to feel connected to them because they've already seen what I look like, know that I know what I'm talking about, know that I'm not a shady contractor, any of those things. And so that was enough encouragement for me to go, I need to keep doing this. This is good. This is good for my little fledgling business. I'm going to keep making videos. And so I've just kind of kept at it ever since. Well, I really went off on a diatribe there. Sorry, Nate.
I love it. That's amazing.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I got a bunch of thoughts, but I want to keep steering it. But first off, was that hard for you those first couple of times your plumber filming you with a flip camera, or were you always kind of? I mean, to me, you seem like a total natural. But did you have to work at it? Or my dad's a natural. He basically from minute one was a pro. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, Scott, I think we're probably fairly alike. We're natural teachers. We want people to learn and to do better. You're not afraid to give away what other builders would call secrets, even though, a lot of builders, when I first started doing it, would be like, Matt, you shouldn't tell other builders how to do that. That's your proprietary, that's your competitive advantage.
Stock and trade, baby. Yeah.
What? No. I mean, when was the last time you went to a party and someone didn't have a story about a builder that was terrible or a house problem? Or a failure? Why not all of us get better, and then I can just get better, and you can get better, right? I mean, that's
healthy.
I think that's
healthy.
So as a result, Nate, I think it's probably for Scott and I both. It's been pretty natural. We've certainly gotten probably better at our presentation over the years, but YouTube's pretty forgiving on ifs and ums and mumbles, and as long as you're genuine. And of course, probably you guys, just like me, have upped your production game over the years, and you edit things out and that sort of thing. But when I started on YouTube, I didn't even edit anything. I maybe trimmed it at the beginning where I said, okay, press the go button, but other than that, I didn't trim anything. I just posted it as it was. And I also figured, well, only 50 people are watching it. What's the chances that someone I know? Pretty limited, right?
Well, for both of you, whether you're selling a job as a remodel, Dad, or even a build, or you a custom home, but as opposed to maybe just some subcontractor who really can just kind of show up and do their job and leave, you guys are kind of selling and explaining as a part of your trade, whether you're explaining to the general public or explaining to the client. You already had an interface with a lay person that was probably well developed at that point.
It was for me, and particularly because Matt, I had tried hard to segue over into blacksmithing like 16 years ago, and that's how we started the channel. We imagined that the channel was going to be primarily filmed in my forge, in my blacksmith shop, because I had been making gates and grills and railings and stuff as a way to augment my small contractor thing. And so Nate one day said, Dad, I think they'd like to see the inside of your shop. and that worked for a while. And then we uploaded a couple of carpentry videos, and there was that interest too. And then we got but I had been the beneficiary, he said, of the willingness of the blacksmith community to download on me this arcane forging knowledge that had been sort of exhumed from the past, right? And the blacksmith community is fabulous about sharing everything. And so it was a short step for me once I realized people were interested in carpentry to think, man, I mean, I have been blessed with people being generous with this blacksmith craft, which I would have otherwise never been able to rediscover. I might as well give this stuff away because it might be a blessing in someone else's life,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing that's unique about you, Scott, even more than me, is that you're the master craftsman, the master builder. That's one thing I think that really sets your channel apart. And I'm a little bit there, but I'm certainly not as much of a craftsman as you are. But people love that you understand plumbing and carpentry and concrete and can explain all those trades. And in fact, you end up doing a lot of those trades. I can kind of nerd out on them and explain them, but I'm not a plumber. But people want to know from our perspective all those different trades and how they interact. And there's always going to be that need for the orchestra conductor, for the symphony master, and that's our role as a builder, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, and some of that goes directly back to one of the first things you said of having that sort of corral full of trusted subcontractors that are all strong where you're weak, and you can trust their motive. They come with a very similar motive to what you have. It just augments your horsepower like nothing else can. It's really a neat thing to have that symbiotic relationship
100%.
with those guys.
Yeah, 100%. And then also, because we have such a trusted background, number one, they know they're going to get paid if I have them do something different that they don't know what it's going to take or how long it's going to take in particular. I have several trades that are time and materials to me, which I am to my customers. And for instance, that's how my carpenter, Bill Wood, who's on a lot of my videos and frames most of my houses, he doesn't bid anything for me. I have a yearly sit down with him and we talk about his rate, his day, man, week rate. And then together, we typically decide what the budget's going to be for his phases because we have a long history together. But if there's something that we've never done before, like I just did a detail in my house under construction where I'm about to put my metal roof on. We've done 1x4 lath to elevate the roof, so it's on an air gap. But I also did a detail where I'm doing a vented ridge detail. That's what they call a vapor vent or a vapor diffusion port is what Joe Stiebrick calls it, where we basically use peel and stick almost up to the ridge, but at the ridge we use the vapor permeable product so that my roof, which is essentially a SIPS roof, if there's any condensation or moisture that builds up, can go through there. Well, for me, all it took was Andrew, my assistant, sketching some things out. And Bill's like, yeah, I'll have 2 guys over there tomorrow. No problem. Just tell them what you need. Great. I showed them the sketch. We talked about it. They did a detail that I've never done before. They've never done before. And boom, 2 guys did it in 2 days. Perfect.
And you knew as soon as you saw it that it was the right thing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And those guys are hard workers. They're always at it. And they're always like, what do you need me to do? I can do something different. Or do you want to do that like we always do it? Yeah, okay, great. I got that. No problem.
Bam.
Yeah, so that's the speed of trust. When you trust somebody, things can be lightning fast.
Yeah. Just so awesome.
Yeah,
speed really
of trust. Awesome. I have this real unfair advantage in that I have Nate to sort of be a set of eyes about what's truly interesting, because I can nerd out on the details of the string and of the hammer weight and of those things and things that seem to me to be pressing, and that he is seeing it with a different set of eyes, equally invested, but he can think in terms of the story. And that's one of the things that he learned within the first year that we were doing this, that these videos have to tell a story. And it's really neat for me not to have to even think about that, because he's continually bringing us back to the thread of the story that is the reason that people came, even if they don't know that's why they came to begin with. It's what keeps them there over time. And I'm thankful for that. So how do you do that? I mean, you dive, the science is mostly your story, right? I mean, the science and the technical details is a story you're telling.
Yeah, I end up pretty much doing that myself, Scott. I have a bunch of people help me on the technical side. I never have to think about cameras or editing or any of that kind of stuff. Well, that's not true. I still look at the edits and make notes or changes, but I'm still kind of the head storyteller. And I'm always trying to think. For me, I'm always thinking, well, I've made a lot of mistakes building. What would Matt want to know 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah.
So I always think of my audience as the younger Matt. When I started this company when I was 32, I had this group of builders that were probably your age, Scott, that they were kind enough to allow me to take them to lunch and buy them a Subway sandwich and pick their brain and all kinds of stuff, or call them and say, "Hey, I got this client who wants a guaranteed maximum price contract. What do I say? Have you done one of those before? What's the pitfalls? What should I do with this? Should I push back on that? Or, my stucco guy is telling me that I should do this. What do you think about that? That seems wrong to me."
Yeah.
So I had about a half dozen builders, which one of them now is my VP of construction, that, man, anytime I needed something, I would call those guys. They were super kind. And I also got really actively involved with our Home Builders Association, which had an excellent custom builders group of about 50 or 75 builders that would come on a regular basis and have meetings. And man, that was vital for me. So my YouTube story is always, hey, what would I have wished that I would have known, or how can this detail also help one of my project managers who maybe doesn't have the same experience level that I do? And that's kind of my angle.
That's a great story.
That's great. So about house building, we're kind of finishing up a house, where we're getting there. This is your bread and butter, is helping people through this process. And one thing that we have not been able to convey, because you almost have to experience it, is the starting phase where a person, let's say a client of yours, would have an idea, but there's like 5 different things that are all happening at the same time. They're trying to find a lot. They're trying to pick a plan. They can't really pick a plan without an architect. They can't really have an architect without a builder to recommend somebody. It seems like it's just a choppy start. And so if there's someone listening who might be kind of experiencing that, how do you help clients, get moving in this starting phase of building a house, which is maybe more challenging than people realize?
Yeah, it is challenging. For me, I've always felt like finding a really trusted builder and paying them as a consultant is an excellent way to go. And that's what I do with my clients. They hire me under my company under a pre-construction services agreement. And more these days, they're finding us first, which has been really fun. Over the last 15 years, the majority of our clients have come as a referral, typically from an architect where they've already gone to the architect. They usually have the land already, and then the architect is saying, "Hey, we need to find you a really good builder." There's a lot of good builders in this town, which is fantastic for people building in Austin. And so I'm going to give you 3 companies that I really like. There's this company, Reisinger Build, and there's these 2 others that I think would be a good fit for you from what I know about you. They're excellent builders. They have great reputations. They're slightly different to work with. Every company's got a different personality, but any one of them will help you and will help you with pricing and will get you, started on this process. That's how I've generally done it. But more and more today, I have people calling my office saying, "Hey, I'm really interested in you guys building the house because you guys have a great reputation. I've watched a bunch of your videos. What's the process? Or I have a piece of land and I really want to talk to you guys. Who do you recommend for doing the architecture?" And that's really fun to be on the other side of it now, where we can get to know the client and get to know them and then recommend someone to do the architecture. And we also have we have a deep bench of architects in this town. This very good town for design and for building. And there's also a lot going on. This town has just grown a ton in the 15 years I've been here.
Yeah, even so the last year, it seems, or at least that's what the news say was California's moving. Are you seeing that?
Big time. I've probably interviewed for more very large projects for people that have a ton of money and are moving from California. Unfortunately, the COVID thing it hit businesses really hard, and you guys know, as business owners, I'm thankful I wasn't in travel or tourism or
Oh man,
hotels or
amen.
airlines. I did a trip 2 weeks ago, probably one of the first trips I've been on a plane, and the guy who brought me from my car to the airport in the shuttle bus said he'd just been back to work for the first time.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my goodness. I mean, he was doing side businesses and he was driving Uber, and we forget because
We forget.
we've been busy, but we're incredibly blessed to have
Yeah.
money in the bank account and not thinking, how am I going to get groceries tonight, or how am I going to put gas in my car?
Yeah.
All of us as builders, if you've been a builder for more than 10 years, have experienced good times and bad times. And our friends in a bunch of other industries are experiencing bad times.
Ronald
And
Reagan's classic quote: "The difference, it's when your neighbor's out of work, it's a recession, and when you're out of work, it's a depression." Right? And
that's
I am
right.
just so thankful that the upheaval for so many families has sort of missed us. In the context of construction and social media. Entertainment.
Yeah.
Did you ever think? It never would have been believable to me that any part of what I was doing would be considered entertainment or education. It's
I
unbelievable.
know. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
It's totally unreal.
yeah. It
It's
is.
totally unreal.
You've been through a recession. You obviously had that deal go bad in '08, as every other builder and investor did. But so you can speak to going through that. So what you probably expect someday things could hit the building industry again. What do you say to people who maybe are hit, or what's been your approach preparing for maybe an eventual downturn? Considering you've seen it before.
Yeah, I totally changed my business, Nate, after that last recession. I don't do any speculative builds, and I'm really, any builder that comes to me and talks about it, I tell them my story and say, man, I'd be really cautious about that, because as great as that is to sell today, all it takes is a month or two to change the whims of America,
Yep.
and all of a sudden that speculative build that you built, you can't sell, and you're on the hook for a personal guarantee pretty much no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah.
So it's just a risk that I'm unwilling to take now. The other thing that I did was I got real big on reading and watching Dave Ramsey, and he's big on not having debt, which I had a ton of debt. I had both my credit cards maxed to the point where I remember vividly my wife calling me and saying, "Hey, I just went to get money out of the ATM because I got to pay our sitter, and it says we have $1.37 in the account. So when you come home from work, you need to magically come up with some money."
Wow.
And I pull out my wallet. I got nothing in my wallet. What am I going to do?
Yep.
It's those kinds of situations that are still burned in my memory.
Yeah.
So there's not a better time to plan for a recession or for changes in your business than today. And being really cautious about buying things on debt or doing jobs that are speculative, that are unsold, I think is a great way to prepare for that next change. And that's really what I've done. Is my business doesn't have any debt. I don't have any personal debt. Anytime we've bought a car in the last 10 years, we've always paid cash for it. And if we don't like that car, we'll keep it until you have the cash to buy a new one. Don't buy it until you have the cash.
I think Dave Ramsey would love to have you on his show, man. You could do the debt-free scream, right?
I mean, I'm the poster boy for what not to do. Is true both in finances and in building, Scott. I mean, I've made every mistake and done every screw up you can in the building world.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about YouTube, is because I'm hoping that younger builders will listen and watch my videos and not make the same mistakes, or not have the same heartbreak that I've gone through when I've made mistakes.
It's interesting. Your brand and your building process is centered around the science, which implies long-lasting and quality structures. And there's certainly a self-interest aspect to that, because you're a lot less likely to get sued when your houses aren't leaking and such. And I got to think, as a conservative guy who's not buying cars on debt and speculating, that must play some aspect to your overall approach to how you build. Is that close?
Yeah, 100%. And, I all the time get people that will say, oh, this is too expensive or this detail's too much. Well, if it's a water related detail, it needs to be whatever is the right detail for the house, and your client needs to pay for it. Because if your client doesn't pay for it or can't afford to do that detail, how are they going to afford to redo it in 3 years when you're getting sued?
Yeah.
You're going to pay for it, not your client.
That's right.
And I learned that lesson the hard way. I came out of Oregon thinking that I was the waterproofing expert. But of course, in Oregon, every house had overhangs. So then I moved to Texas, and one of my first paying client jobs, is a house with no overhangs. And here I was like, oh, I got this. I could build in a rainy climate. I had no problem. Well, I built a house with no overhangs. And you know what a scupper is? It's where you have a hole in a parapet wall. I built this house that every scupper in the entire house leaked.
Oh.
And, we got 3-4 inch rainstorms that not only does it leak, it leaks bad.
Yeah. Lots of water.
Lots of water. So here it is, the recession. And this is a job that my client said to me, Matt, you got to get 3 bids on every phase. And I was like, all right, yeah, I have to get this work. No problem. I'll do it. So I took the lowest roofing bidder.
Sure.
Which the roofer went out of business about 6 months after I finished the job. And I talked to him a couple times about the leaks, and we caulked it or whatever. By the time I realized every one of these is leaking, we got to rip the roof off, he was long gone. He had no insurance. He was out of business. It was 100% on me. I didn't have the money to pay for it either, but I had to do it. It cost me $30,000 to rip off that entire roof and redo it correctly. Now with the next more expensive bidder, which I paid for, not my client. And I learned a hard lesson. Yeah. However, that came back around, and now I'm doing a multi-million-dollar house for that same client.
See, that closes that loop so beautifully. Now, life is not always fair, but it was fair that time, man. That's awesome.
It was painful to pay that $30,000, but you know what? I've made it back probably in the first draw with this client 10 years later on a really expensive project. And they're like, of course we're going to use you. Why wouldn't we use you?
Why wouldn't we?
Not that we didn't have any problems, but when you had a problem, you took care of it.
Yeah.
And that's a huge lesson learned for me as a builder. And we need to learn those lessons as builders in general. When you have a problem, don't run away, run to it.
Yeah.
And even if it's costly or painful, take care of it.
Take care of it. That's the best advertising you can buy.
100%.
Wow. Yeah. It's like the tortoise and the hare too. Could there be easier money by, just slamming it and running and high? Maybe, but there's something to be said for slow and steady and doing it right, high ethics.
No one likes fast barbecue. Same with businesses. Same with building companies.
That's so true.
So here's my last question, Matt, and then we'll let you go. But, we talked about social media a lot, and I'm on social media all the time, and I love it, of course. But it is so hard to see all of these. And let's just talk about building and YouTube and such. That it just is easy to seem like everybody else has all this great stuff going on, and I don't know if it's like this for you, but for me, sometimes it can put you down a little bit at the same time. So I'm wondering if you see that, with Instagram, for example, even among builders, there are so many beautiful house projects that builders are showcasing, and I'm glad they do. That it's easy to feel like, oh man, I'm never gonna XYZ, whether it's build that or own that or whatever. So am I the only? And this is for you too, Dad. But how do you guys kind of interact with social media in that way?
Yeah, I got 2 things that I think of immediately when I think of that, Nate. Number one, I actually heard a great sermon about this past weekend at church, where the pastor was talking about. There was a passage in the Bible where Jesus said, basically, who wants to be the greatest? And a bunch of the disciples were like, oh, I want to sit next to you in heaven. Like, I want to be the greatest. And the point of the story was basically that their pride made them want to be not the greatest, but just better than everybody else, to feel like they're better. And that hits home for me, right? Like, sometimes I'm competitive because I just want to be better than the others, not because I want to be the best. Or in fact, a big point of the sermon was not there's nothing wrong with wanting to be great or that wanting to do great things. Jesus was amazing, but he didn't do it because he had pride. He did it because he genuinely cared about people. So for us as builders, as YouTubers, as bloggers, it's totally fine for us to have big aspirations, but we shouldn't take pride in that we're better than the next guy, or I've got more YouTube subs than you, or whatever. Actually, you have more than me.
Weird.
But
That's weird.
but why not care about others enough that we are excited to see them put something cool out on Instagram? And the other thing I would tell you, which is a little bit more down to earth and not as ethereal as that, is every builder has problems. They just don't put them on YouTube.
Yeah, man.
And I have a competitor in my town that is well regarded as the best, most expensive. He's 20 plus years older than me, just incredible company. And you see the photos and images of his houses, and you just think, oh my gosh, I mean, they're crushing it. I know he lives in a big house and has a helicopter and all these things. Well, we went out not too long ago, maybe 2 years ago, on a job where the client was firing that builder and wanted me to take over the job. Actually, me and one other builder were interviewing. And I'm walking the job. I'm like, really? What? Why is this builder getting fired? And I'm thinking, oh, we're going to see some obvious stuff. No, the house was like beautiful. Like there wasn't a plumbing pipe that wasn't perfectly, pristinely placed, and there wasn't a wire that wasn't perfectly put in, and the waterproofing was perfect, and the window details. I was thinking, why is he getting fired? I actually don't know the end of that story, but my point is, just because your Instagram feed or whatever is perfect does not mean that they don't have marriage problems. They're not getting a divorce. They don't have kids that are, in trouble. We forget that we always put our best foot out there first. And it's really easy to get wrapped up in, oh, they've got better projects than me, or they're doing cooler jobs. When you know what? They have the same problems you do. Just keep your head down, keep doing your absolute best work you can. And if you do that, you'll get that reputation, and you'll continue to climb the ladder to do better and cooler and more interesting jobs. And that's totally been my story. So, with that being said, Scott, I'd love to hear what you think of when, because I think of the same for you. I mean, you're the pinnacle of the trusted builder. Do you sometimes feel jealous of those photos as well?
So I just love what you just said, because the rest of that parable was that he who would be greatest among you should be the servant of all, right?
That's right.
And so if we can hang on to that and realize that we are in the service industry, right? We just happen to be building beautiful things, or not so beautiful things, that we're building things for people that, doggone it, they need, and hopefully they can afford.
Yep.
There's real satisfaction in that, right? And the reputation
100%.
The reputation that can come from that is the reputation of being a profitable servant, somebody who came in and exceeded an expectation and walked away having done something that improved the quality of their life. And then I also love C.S. Lewis. And so what you were just saying, I was thinking, man, preaching out of the same passage, because he talks about pride. And as I remember, probably in Mere Christianity, I'm not sure, but he uses the metaphor of an architect or a builder who can take as much satisfaction in a gorgeous cathedral that's built by another person as if he had built it himself. And if it was one that he built himself, he takes no more satisfaction in it than in one that has similar beauty that's built by another guy. And if we can't find that zone, even if it's separate from Christianity, because there are people that may be listening to us for whom this is somewhat foreign and perhaps off-putting at this point. But if we can't find that zone where we are not threatened by someone else's success and we're not puffed up because we happen to hit a long ball, then life is going to be a short, miserable, sort of sweaty disappointment when we get to the end of it. And none of it was what we had hoped. And if we can find that, being just competitive enough to always do the best darn job we can, and not so competitive that we trip because somebody else beat us, right? I mean, that's when we find our life. That's when we find life. So thank you for those remarks, man. That resonates with me, and I think there's a ton of truth in it.
Well, isn't that craftsmanship ultimately too, Scott? I mean, I don't know what your faith is, but mine is that there's a creator
Yep.
who was creative, and I get to be creative as well and
Yep.
create things from nothing.
Yep.
I take raw materials that he made, which is wood, and I turn them into something for my clients and be creative. I think that craftsmanship runs through all races, religions,
It does.
sexes, whatever.
Yep.
Craftsmanship, there's something about it, that creative, I'm doing something, I'm doing it to the best of my abilities. I'm out here giving it my best every day.
Yep.
That I don't care what religion, what country you're from,
Yep.
people respect that.
Yep.
And I think I love that you've got it in your title, that what is that essential element of craftsmanship? It's the thing that binds us.
It is.
And everyone can tell craftsmanship, whether it's a $100,000 house or $100 million house.
That's right.
And but the other thing is you can also see when it's not there.
You can see
right?
the
How many
lack.
times?
Yep.
How many times have you walked a multi-million-dollar house? You're like, ooh,
Yeah.
the craftsmanship's not there.
Yeah. The craftsmanship is a 16th of an inch deep on that wall, and behind
Yeah.
that, you don't want to see it, man. Nobody wants to see it. Yeah. I believe we are created with the germ of making. That part of being created in God's image is to love to make, and that there's a satisfaction in that doesn't come in any other way that I've found.
100%. That's why we're like him.
Yeah.
Well, can't thank you enough, Matt. We're going to put links to, in case there is anyone who isn't familiar with your YouTube channel, we'll of course link to that. Do you want to let us know about the Build channel, the network, and kind of talk about that for a minute, and we'll end on that?
That sounds great, Nate. So I started buildshownetwork.com, all one word, buildshownetwork.com. We've been up for a year and maybe 3 months now. And I've got 4 other builders and one of their architects shooting videos. We actually have 6 new videos a week.
Wow.
Over on buildshownetwork.com. And it's been really fun for me because it's kind of my version of Netflix or YouTube. We actually go out to advertisers and we sell 15-second ads in front of all the videos, whether they're mine or one of those creators. And then I share with them some of the ad share, just like YouTube does with me. But it's fun because I've got like-minded builders and craftsmen on there from different parts of the country, different styles, that sort of thing. My hope is that we'll grow that to 20 or 30 different folks in the future. And we'll have this little platform that maybe will end up in other places as well. And I do want to mention, I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but April 1 is the Build Show podcast release date on iTunes. We've got a couple episodes under our belt already, so we're following your footsteps in the podcast world. I'm a little behind the game there, so I'm going to try and catch up.
Well, we feel the same way, but you're the type of guy to dig in and not let that hold you back. That's really exciting news. I can't wait to hear that. April 1st, we'll definitely have this up by then. So listeners, check that out. We'll link to that. And Matt, thank you so much. This was a pleasure for the listeners. This is our first time getting to know Matt, chatting with him. Yeah. We have an enormous amount of overlap, and
yeah, we do. We got to do a collab one of these days.
Let's do it.
That'd be really fun.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. In fact, I've got a few ideas rattling around in my old noodle, and hopefully we can make one of them happen. Wonderful. Well, have a great night, Matt. Thanks for your time, and
keep that tab open. Keep that tab open until this program uploads what you did.
10-4. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.